Hey, what's up guys? So I just picked up an outboard motor here, and this might be the best deal that I've ever gotten on an outboard motor. So here it is. It's a Honda, 20 horsepower. It's a 2005. It's a long shaft, and I only paid 20 bucks for this thing. So it was actually posted for free, which is the crazy part. You know, someone just posted like Honda boat motor free, don't know if it runs. And I've been up for like already an hour or two, so I thought I missed out on it. And I kind of just threw a Hail Mary at the guy and was like, hey dude, I'll give you 20 bucks. Like, I'll come pick it up right now. And he messaged right away and said it was available. So I didn't even know it was a 20 horsepower going into it. You know, by the photos, it looked like it was an 8 horsepower. So when I saw it was a 20, like I was honestly mind blown that someone would just give this away for free. So yeah, here's under the cowling. So far, all I've done is I pulled out the spark plugs. You know, I pulled it over and it's not even locked up. Luckily, it was stored in the upright position. If we can get this thing running for $20 Honda, that would be awesome. Yeah, this thing turns over really smooth too. So I'm just gonna do a little spark test here on the top cylinder and see if this motor's got any spark. Okay, so down in here, that's where the drain hole is on the carburetor. And when I took off the screw right here, it was almost like oil coming out of there, the consistency of the gas. So I kept pumping the primer bulb till all the old gas came out, and now the gas looks good. So man, let's try and fire this up and see if we can get away without a carb clean. That'd be amazing. Unreal. These ports might be clogged up. This kill switch works. Sweet. Okay, so I cleaned this out. More often than not, usually there's just something blocking the passage in the water line. Happens a lot. So let me try firing it up and see if it pumps better water. I'm going to take off this side panel here to get better access to the carburetor and the water line that's connected to this telltale. Alright, so I got the side cover off. It's just 5 screws. So I want to see what's going on with this water line in here. A lot of times bugs and dirt get stuck up in here. And make sure, yeah, there's a little bit of dirt actually on here. There's 2 10-mil bolts holding this airbox on that you got to loosen. You gotta take off this line, go into the airbox, and there's a little linkage down in there you gotta pop off, and then just pop off this fuel line here. Okay, I got the carb off, and there's also this little screw-on choke lever that needs to be disconnected here. So let's start cleaning these jets. All right, so there's just 4 screws holding on this carb here. So let's take a look. And actually, that looks pretty clean. Actually looks really clean. I kind of have a feeling it's just the jets that just have a tiny bit of debris in it since it was running but just wasn't idling, and there's a little hesitation giving it throttle sometimes. Okay, there's just a little jet on the side here that I got removed that we're just gonna clean out. Yeah, it actually was impacted. Before there was just like a tiny bit of debris in there, but now it's clear. Yeah, we're gonna inspect under here too. All right, clean the carb and threw it back on. And I just left the panel off. I want to see how well it pumps water here. Pumping a lot better water. Idling a lot better. Okay, so still working on this Honda 20 horsepower, and I haven't done too much recording of me firing it up, but here's what I think is going on with it. So I think it's got an overheating issue on it. So this motor has an overheating feature that shuts off the motor if it's overheating. So what it will do is it will run for like a few minutes, and then it'll shut off, and then I can fire it back up. It idles perfectly fine. Then it'll shut off after like 30 seconds. You know, it's pumping good water, but I'm thinking it's not pumping enough water. So I've tried the earmuffs. I've tried putting it in like a big trash can of water, and it's still overheating. You know, I've even changed out the thermostat, put another one in there. It's still overheating. Both thermostats I've tried worked. All right, so to take off the lower unit to get the impeller, there's just a few bolts holding it on, there's actually this linkage in here that you need to know what position it's in. So right now it's in neutral, so I kind of just need to remember the positioning of this to make sure that all the gears will shift properly once I reconnect it. But yeah, we're gonna pop off the housing and see how the impeller looks. Here's the impeller. It's actually missing a fin, and these other fins are pretty destroyed. Yeah, this one's missing some chunks. This one's about to rip off. So yeah, I wasn't pumping good water, so I think that was the overheating issue I was having. See the difference between the two impellers. So let me install this, I'll grease this, and then throw it back on. So I got an update on this Honda 20 horsepower right here. So if you look right here, I have the temperature sensor disconnected, and so with it disconnected, this motor runs flawlessly. I ran it for about 10 or 15 minutes. You know, it has no issues. Before it was shutting off about after a few minutes, and either this temperature sensor is malfunctioning, which I need to test, or if you look at the old impeller here, there's a piece of fin missing that I couldn't find, and so unfortunately that may be stuck up in the block here, causing it to overheat and not getting enough water flow. With the housing off, I'm actually gonna back flush it here. I'm gonna shoot water up through the exhaust P hole here, and it's gonna shoot out of here, and it's gonna get any pieces of impeller or any debris that's blocking the flow potentially. I'm also gonna shoot it up this water intake here too to knock anything free. Alright, so actually going in the lower unit, I found little pieces of rubber, assuming from the impeller here, that was broken off, but it's still, actually when I plug in the temp sensor shuts down. Here, I'll show you. Yeah, so it's been running for a while. No issues. The second you plug in the temp sensor, I mean the block doesn't even feel that hot to the touch. And once you plug it in, so now it's plugged in, try to give it some RPMs. Logs down. So now with it unplugged. Okay, I'm gonna replace the water temperature sensor here. You just need a 3/4 inch wrench to take it off. Got a new one here. Luckily it's a pretty cheap part. And so hopefully this fixes our overheating issue and that this has just failed. If this doesn't fix it, then I probably need to get like an infrared temperature sensor to really see what the temperature is, because that possibly means that under the thermostat here and under the water housing area that there's some potential blockage not allowing enough water to pass, meaning it actually is overheating. So hopefully this just fixes our issue. Okay, so I got a new impeller housing on the left here, but if you can see this old one in this region right in here, there's some melted plastic. You know, I probably could have chipped it away, but I think that melted plastic was impeding water flow, and this new one on the left here doesn't have that, so this new housing should allow better water flow. Alright, so update on this Honda 20. I think it's finally running right. I dropped the lower unit and I found more pieces of this broken impeller. This time it was under the impeller housing, like in the water pickup lines. And so I removed that piece of this broken impeller stuck in there. I made sure all the fins on the impeller were facing the right way. And now it's been running like 15 or 20 minutes. Been giving it throttle a bunch and it won't overheat and it's not shutting off. So I think it's finally running right. Yeah, so now that temperature sensor alarm isn't triggering it to go into limp mode, which it was doing like after running for a few minutes, it would overheat and kind of go into limp mode and the throttle wouldn't work and it would shut down. Yeah, it's not going into that limp mode. Yo, what's up guys? So we got another outboard motor here. Got a sweet deal on it. It's a 15 horsepower Mercury 4-stroke. It's 2006. It's a short shaft, and I bought it from a guy that he bought an abandoned storage unit, and this was in there, and he knew nothing about outboards, so that's why I got a pretty good price on it. So I pretty much bought it sight unseen. I threw gas in it when I bought it about a month ago, and it fired right up and ran pretty good. But I just took it to the launch ramp right now and it was struggling to idle. I think I ran all the gas out of it, but maybe I didn't, but it had only been a month and it's not running right now. But so far all I've done to it is the guy dropped it and it was like missing some chunks of the cowling, so I did kind of shoddy patch job, but it's definitely a lot better than it looked. But you know, under the hood, it's like a super clean motor, like probably only freshwater use. Like really no corrosion on it. So yeah, probably just has some fuel that's been sitting in there too long. So yeah, we'll take the carb off right now and give it a clean, see if that fixes it. Well, I got the carb off, but this could have been the issue. This fuel connector is leaking. So I think maybe the ring inside is busted, but I got another. I think it's the right kind, but let's take this off and stop this fuel leaking on the ground. All right, well, I swapped it out with a Tohatsu connector right now. So now it's not leaking any fuel. So I think that fixed our issue. Well, I got the carb off here. I mean, more than likely it was an issue with the fuel connector, just flooding the carb and the fuel pump, but we got the carb off anyway, so we'll give it a clean. Well, actually, no, the carb is actually pretty dirty, so I'm actually glad I took this off. It just looks like deposits of fuel just from sitting too long. Yeah, there's this little jet that's clogged that was down in here that I was able to get out. So I'm gonna clean this, put it back together, and I think it should be running right. All right, let's see if it wants to fire up with a clean carb and a fuel selector that's not leaking. There we go. That's how it was running like a month ago. Yeah, at the ramp it wouldn't idle. Yeah, on this free boat, Merc 15. Just got her up to 23 miles an hour. She's ripping good. Yeah, this boat's pretty stable too. Got a nice big bow. So today what we're working on is a 8 horsepower. It's a Johnson 4-stroke long shaft. You know, when you think of Johnson, you typically think of 2-stroke, but this is a 4-stroke. It's a 1996, and a customer gave me this. Said he couldn't get it running. It's been sitting around for a few years now, and he thinks it may have lost spark. A little dirty, but that's all right. You know, I checked the oil. It's kind of low. It's not too brown, but you know, we're gonna service it once it's running. I got the spark plugs out. They are pretty fouled up, but at least they're not rusty, meaning water was in the cylinder. Let's check the compression on the top cylinder here. All right, the top cylinder is reading about 140. So yeah, compression on the bottom cylinder is like 135. Okay, so it's got compression, so let's ground the spark plugs to the block and see if we got spark. Let's see the bottom cylinder if we got spark. Yeah, it's got spark. All right, cleaned up these plugs a bit. All right, all this stuff came out of these 2 plugs. I don't know if you can see, but the spark plug on the right is gapped way smaller than the one on the left. So I'm gonna gap these properly and throw them back in the motor. It was pretty low on oil. I just added like 8 ounces or so. So now it's like about at that full line. So yeah, let's fire it up. Oh, I hooked up a fuel tank. Pumped the primer bulb, and it was already kind of hard, so that means there's probably old fuel in here. So I'm just gonna take this drain, screw off the carb, try to pump out all the old fuel. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, but that fuel is like the consistency of oil. That is nasty. It's literally like gold and super viscous. No carb clean? It's not peeing any water. This is probably gummed up. Really not a fan of these plastic little covers on the pee hole. They always seem to gum up. Yeah, I can already feel some blockage like a few inches up. Here, let me fire it up and then I'll keep shoving this in here to clear out anything still stuck up in there. Yeah, it's pumping water. Actually not a bad stream. That oil looks good. It's not milky. I just gave it an oil change, forgot to record, but it takes about a quart of oil. So yeah, let's just fire it up and make sure it's still running good. Let's start working on this Honda. You know, I've worked on a handful of these Hondas over the years, and really the two biggest things is that the carb gets gummed up. Another thing too is these motors tend to lose spark, and I have two parts motors here, one here, and then a Honda 10 back there. You know, on eBay you can buy a coil, or you could buy a CDI if it's a CDI one, but they end up being like 100, 200 bucks, and a lot of times these motors are cheap. Like this one was 100 bucks. That one I think was 100 bucks. So I mean, you can just end up picking up a whole nother motor for cheaper than just buying the part. So with these two parts motors I have here, we should be able to get this motor running. All right, so when removing these fuel lines from this fuel pump here, be very gentle because this is like a 40-year-old fuel pump, and I've broken the stem like once or twice on these. So just take your time and just twist it off. Let's see if we can get away without a carb clean. It's gonna most likely need a carb clean. These carbs are really sensitive, but let's check under the fuel pump here and just see how this fuel filter and this fuel pump look. It's actually not too bad. So looking at the carb right here, there's the drain screw at the bottom. It's already looking kind of nasty. So we're gonna hook up a fuel tank, pump out any crap that's in the carb right here. Hopefully it doesn't look too bad, and try firing it up. Alright, just checking the oil here. You know, it's got oil. It's pretty dirty, but it looks like it's got enough at least to fire it up. Got a nickel, you know, just to adjust the idle. It's been running for like 10 minutes, hasn't shut off. But it's missing a stop button. Just pulled one off one of the parts motor. See if we can. Cool. Alright, doing an oil change on this Honda 10 horsepower. Just got my siphon pump hooked up here. Find it to be easier just to pump out all the old oil. Yeah, you can see it's pretty nasty. Okay, so just to recap on everything I've done to this Honda 10 horsepower. I actually took the lower unit off. I was going to change the impeller, but the original impeller in there looked fine. It had all of its fins. It wasn't warped, so I just kept that. I put a stop button on here, just took it off a parts motor. Didn't even clean the carb, which is pretty rare for these motors. Usually the carb is gummed up, but this one was fine. I changed the oil in the motor, and I changed the oil in the lower unit. And luckily, I haven't had to do all that much to this motor. It just fired up. Also added this bracket piece here to hold this Yamaha fuel connector on, since I cannot find the original Honda one. And yeah, let's fire it up. Fires right up. feel like the camera doesn't do it justice, but it's actually pumping good water. Okay, so working on this Suzuki 8 horsepower, and I want to get it on the transom here a little bit better on this motor stand, but this clamp is seized up. I already hit it with some PB Blaster, but it's not doing it. So I got a blowtorch right here that I'm gonna hit it with and try to free up this clamp. Yeah, these spark plugs are super fouled up. I got my compression gauge. Let's just see what the compression is on this motor. All right, top cylinder, we got 120 PSI, so that's good. All right, bottom cylinder is also 120, so even compression. I'm just gonna clean these plugs off because they are nasty. There's a lot of stuff inside the plugs too that. Yeah, look at all that. All right, I took off the Suzuki connector since I didn't have one. Just have a Hatsu one on here. I'm just gonna throw some gas in it, throw some oil in it and see what happens. Yeah, this throttle linkage is broken, but I did get it to fire up, so let me fire it up. After like 30 minutes, got this nasty lower unit off. I bet this impeller's destroyed. I also broke off 2 bolts because they are so rusted out that there's just no way to get them out without breaking them. So I'm gonna have to maybe try to weld a nut onto here or something and try and remove these and save these threads, but we'll see. Yeah, let's check out this nasty impeller, see what we got going on. Yeah, this impeller has like 3-4 fins, 2 pieces of the fin right here. So that's why I wasn't pumping water. Well, here's the difference between the two. So yeah, let's put this new impeller on. And how to get these out is I just get a nut and put the nut, and luckily there were still enough threads on these broken bolts, weld the nut to the broken bolt, and then I was able to extract both of these 2 broken bolts here. Okay, putting the lower unit back on, I am gonna drown these bolts in anti-seize just so they don't get stuck again and don't break off any bolts. They don't sell this plastic wheel that this throttle cable sits in, and I can't find a used one online. So I just drilled 2 screws in to hold that throttle little bead in place, since the plastic here is super warped, but it seems to be doing its job. It's not moving, so I guess it's kind of fixed. Okay, so I noticed while running it, it wasn't really peeing much water at idle, because I got the thermostat out here. It's right behind here, and this thing was all nasty and had a bunch of like corrosion and salt built up on it, and so it was impeding the water flow at idle. So I put a new thermostat in, and now it seems to be running pretty good. This little modification I made hasn't come undone. It seems actually pretty secure. I did have to move it back a little bit just because the idle was a little bit high, but it's set now for the perfect idle, so I'll fire it up. Pretty quiet too. Shut it off, the button works. Alright, just got another motor. It's a Yamaha 4 horsepower, 4-stroke. It's got an internal tank, it's a long shaft, and the guy said he just had it out and he gave it to me for pretty cheap because the pull starter broke off here, and he just gave me the handle, and he said he couldn't pull out the string here, but when I got it, it was actually in forward gear, And so obviously you can't pull the pull starter in forward. So now that it's in neutral, you know, it's pretty easy just to use some needle nose here and pull it out. So I'm just gonna cut this line and then reattach the handle. Oh, here's an old plug. I mean, it's pretty rusted and corroded, you know, and it's actually the wrong plug number. So here's the right plug. So I'm gonna put this in and see if we get some better spark and maybe it'll fire up. I feel like kind of an idiot, but down in here, this is a fuel select. I knew there was one, I just couldn't find it. But you can kind of look down there. There's like a 3-way selector. And so the fuel was turned to off. All right, got it running. Just gonna already give it a little turn. Just gonna adjust the idle screw right here. This Yamaha 4 horsepower 4-stroke was having an issue of the reverse gear slipping. There's just a little rubber grommet I popped off. Now you have access to this little bracket piece with a 10mm bolt that connects the 2 linkages. And so you can see reverse gear right here. You know, I had to adjust the height slightly to get each of the gears moving the way they should and locking in place. So it's in reverse, the prop's locked. I'm gonna put it to neutral. Prop spins freely. And forward, prop's locked again. And so you want to make sure too that it's clicking each time and that the prop is moving the way it's supposed to. There's little grooves in here that catch for each gear. Alright, got another sweet deal on a motor here. So it's a Mercury 5 horsepower, 2-stroke, short shaft. You know, based on the decals, I think it's like late 80s, early 90s. But if you look under the hood here, I like these Mercury 5 horsepower. And actually Nissan and Tohatsu had the same design of these. I think Tohatsu made these for Mercury because it's a single cylinder, so super lightweight. And I got it for 20 bucks. It was actually posted for free. Just offered 20 bucks to secure the deal. And so far, I know that it hasn't been running a year. It's missing the stop button. The wiring's right here. And it's missing the fuel connector and the fuel line that goes to the fuel pump down in here. So pretty easy fixes, but he said it was running a year ago. So let's hook all this stuff up and see if it fires up. Okay, so I got a fuel connector right here and some fuel lines. So this fuel line needs to feed through this hole down in here and then connect to the fuel pump right here. And luckily, there's actually a hole right here that lines up with this threaded part on the fuel connector, and you just have to feed a 10mm bolt that's long enough and it secures the fuel connector. Now I'm just feeding this stop button wire through the hole here, and just these wires need to be spliced with this ignition wiring here. Alright, got the fuel connector hooked up, stop button wired and spliced up. And I threw some fresh gas in it and I forgot to record, but the first pull she fired right up. Alright, gonna do an impeller change on this. There's just 2 bolts holding the lower unit together, and there's a linkage under here. This bolt right here is so stuck, there's a good chance I may break the head off of it. But it's coming out. Yeah, this bolt is super seized up, but amazingly didn't break it off. Yeah, this impeller is destroyed. There's a piece of fin right here broken off, and yeah, it's missing 2 fins. I'm just gonna inspect the lower unit fluid. That is water, so that's not good. Oh, good thing I checked the lower unit fluid because there was none. It was just water. There's literally no oil coming out of here, so I'm gonna add some oil to it. All right, another outboard project. You know the drill. So I just picked this up for super cheap. It's a Mariner made by Yamaha, actually. Said it was made in Japan. Doing a little research that these Mariners were made by Yamaha. Once they were shipped to America, they were just rebranded as Mariner. 30 horsepower, 2-stroke. I think like late 80s, early 90s. It's set up for remote steering. You know, I could even actually add a tiller if I wanted. You know, run the shift and throttle cables, or just the throttle cables, I guess, up to this wheel. Doing a little bit of research. This piece right here is actually for the remote start for the throttle, but it's broken off. So basically you just have to connect some connectors here for the throttle and the shift. It was cut, it looks like, for the power cable, but I guess I could splice some of these wires. But yeah, I have no idea if it runs. Bought it for super cheap, so yeah, let's see if we can get this running. So far I've just removed the spark plugs. They call for NGK B7HS, but they were these Champion ones. I'm assuming the compatible version of these NGK ones, but I actually have the NGK ones. But let's just see a compression test on both these cylinders to see what we're working with. All right, I got my compression gauge on the top cylinder here, and this one obviously has remote start as well. You know, I could hook it up to a battery and just jump the solenoid here, but it's got a pull starter, so I'll just pull it over a handful of times and see what the compression is. 150 on the top cylinder here, so that's pretty good. All right, and this bottom cylinder is about 140, so a little bit off, but if I pulled it over maybe 1 or 2 more times, it might be even enough. But 140 and 150 is pretty good. All right, I got the spark plugs grounded to see if we can see any spark. And I peeled back these terminals on the solenoid here, so I'm gonna jump the solenoid. Got it hooked up to a battery. Let's see if it turns over and if we got any spark. All right, just got a wrench here. Gonna touch these 2 posts. Don't try this at home, kids. Oh yeah, it's got spark. Oh yeah, she's got spark. She's got compression. You know, all she needs is fuel now. And just kind of looking at this motor, you know, unfortunately it doesn't have a tilt tube, which is unfortunate since I have a steering column, like a side console with a steering wheel that I was hoping to hook this up to, but I'm gonna have to modify like a tilt tube of some sort. So I'm kind of leaning toward just getting a tiller. If you can look down in there, you can see some crap in the fuel filter, so let's take this off and clean this before giving it fuel. Yeah, I don't want that going on the carb, so I'm gonna clean this, fill it up with a little bit of premixed fuel to kind of prime the system. Okay, so the previous owner thought it would be a good idea to cut the engine harness. So this is a 7-pin Yamaha connector here, since it's a Mariner Yamaha motor. And so I just have the schematics here on my phone with all the color matchups. And so I got a Yamaha key switch here since it has electric start. So I'm gonna just match up the colors here, splice some of these wires, add some of these connectors, and I think it should work. You know, you could also do this with like a Mercury, but it's gonna have different colors that you gotta match up to. I'm gonna change the lower unit fluid on this Mariner 30, and a lot of times these little flathead screws for the oil drain are usually seized up if it's been sitting for a while, and you're gonna end up stripping them out. I just have a really long flathead screwdriver. I put a pair of vice grips on the end of it just to get a little more torque on it, and so that way, once you put it in there, just put it in there firmly, and you have a lot more leverage to be able to get that flathead out. So they usually come out pretty easily with that technique I use. Okay, so after a few weeks waiting, I finally got this tiller arm from AliExpress. You know, there wasn't many like I don't know, diagrams and stuff to figure out if this is the right part. This was advertised as a Yamaha 25 and 30 tiller arm, but you know, it appears to fit, and it came with this cover piece that fits over there with some bolts. And so I just got to pop off this little rubber piece up in here. It's tucked in there, and then feed the throttle cables through there. And then it looks like it just connects to this wheel here. All right, I got these cables hooked up. So now when I'm giving it throttle, all the linkages are moving. So I had to adjust the height of this. So basically this little groove right here rests on this piece in the flywheel. And so you want that firmly pressed on there, this piece right here. So when you turn the throttle, everything's in sync. And so you want to just make sure the butterfly in there at full throttle, probably can't see it, but all right, got the tiller handle on.